Her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she read the text that shattered her world. Sorry, I can't do this anymore. Don't wait for me. 47 minutes she'd been sitting there, dressed for a proposal that would never come, drowning in a sea of pitying stares. But then a stranger slid into the empty chair across from her, handed her champagne, and whispered 4 words that changed everything. You don't deserve this. Before we dive into this incredible journey, please hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the very end of this story. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. Now, let's begin. 47 minutes. That's how long Claire Bennett had been sitting alone at Billionaire, the kind of restaurant where a single appetizer cost more than her weekly grocery budget. 47 agonizing minutes of pretending to study the wine list, of refreshing her phone screen, of feeling the weight of 100 sympathetic glances burning into her skin. The emerald dress she wore, the one she'd spent 2 paychecks on, suddenly felt like a costume for a role she'd never gotten to play. Her makeup was flawless, applied with the precision of someone preparing for the most important moment of their life. But her hands, trembling in her lap, told a different story entirely. Tonight was supposed to be the night. 3 years with Derek. 3 years of comfortable routines, predictable weekends, and a relationship that felt more like habit than passion. She'd convinced herself that stability was enough, that the butterflies everyone talked about were just fiction. She'd imagined him pulling out a velvet box between dessert and coffee, finally giving her the future she'd been waiting for. Instead, she got a text message. Sorry, C. I can't do this anymore. You deserve more than I can give. Don't wait for me. 11 words. That's all it took to demolish 3 years of her life. The tears came before she could stop them, hot and humiliating, blurring the words on her screen. He'd ended everything while she sat here dressed for a proposal, breaking her heart with a coward's farewell sent from God knows where. Miss? The waiter's voice was gentle, but it landed like an accusation. It was his third approach, his expression a painful mixture of professional courtesy and obvious discomfort. Will you be ordering this evening? Every head in the restaurant seemed to turn toward her. She was a spectacle now. The girl who got stood up, the fool in the pretty green dress. The humiliation pressed down on her chest like a physical weight, crushing the air from her lungs. No, she managed, her voice breaking. I'm leaving. She grabbed her purse, desperate to escape, to disappear into the anonymous city streets where she could fall apart in private. But as she stood, a figure materialized beside her table, blocking her path. He was tall, impossibly handsome, wearing a suit so perfectly tailored it looked custom-made for his body. In his hands were 2 flutes of champagne, bubbles rising like captured starlight. And when he spoke, his voice carried across the nearby tables with confident ease. Sorry I'm late, darling. Then he leaned closer, his presence radiating a warmth that pushed back the cold shame suffocating her. When he whispered, his voice was meant only for her ears. Play along. You don't deserve this humiliation. Before Claire could process what was happening, this mysterious stranger slid into the seat Derek should have occupied. He placed a champagne flute in front of her, his fingers brushing hers for 1 electric second. He raised his own glass, his forest green eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her shattered heart skip a beat. He's going to regret losing you, he said, not as empty comfort, but with a conviction that felt like truth. Trust me on that. Without waiting for her response, he caught the waiter's eye. We'll take the tasting menu for 2, he announced, his voice calm and commanding. And keep the champagne coming. He turned back to her, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. Let's show this restaurant you don't need anyone to shine. Claire stared at him, caught between shock, confusion, and something else, a tiny spark of hope she didn't know she still had. She didn't know whether to laugh, or cry, or run. But one thing was absolutely certain. Her life had just taken a turn she could never have imagined. The first course arrived, seared scallops arranged like edible art. Claire had been moving through the evening in a daze, sipping champagne, nodding along, letting this magnetic stranger orchestrate a rescue she hadn't asked for. But as the waiter departed, leaving them in their bubble of borrowed intimacy, she finally found her voice. "Do you make a habit of rescuing strangers in expensive restaurants?" He paused mid-bite, and a genuine smile transformed his serious features into something warm and approachable. "No," he admitted, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "But there was something in your eyes when I walked in. You weren't just sad, you were defiant. Like you were already planning your comeback. I wanted to see what you'd do next." The raw honesty disarmed her completely. The wall of shame she'd built around herself began to crumble. For the next hour, something unexpected happened. They talked. Really talked. The conversation flowed with the easy rhythm of old friends reuniting after years apart. The stranger who finally introduced himself as James was a master at drawing people out. When she asked what he did for work, he gave a vague, dismissive answer. "I build things, solve problems." But he was an expert at getting her to open up. He asked about the classic novels she taught to bored high schoolers, about the funny thing a student had said that week, about her secret dream of writing a children's book that she'd never told anyone about, not even Derek. He listened with an intensity that was both unnerving and deeply flattering. His phone never appeared. His eyes never wandered to other tables. When she spoke, his focus was absolute, making her feel like her small, ordinary life was the most fascinating story he'd ever heard. For the first time in 3 years, maybe longer, Claire felt truly seen. The chemistry between them hummed in the air like electricity before a storm. Every accidental touch sent sparks racing across her skin. Every shared laugh felt like a secret. When the check arrived, Claire's sense of reality crashed back. "We need to split this," she insisted, already calculating the damage to her teacher's salary and wincing. James simply waved his hand, a gesture of effortless dismissal. "Tonight is on me. No arguments." Outside, the cool night air felt like a splash of cold water against her flushed face. A sleek black limousine waited at the curb, its engine purring quietly. A uniformed driver stepped out, opening the rear door with practiced precision. "Good evening, Mr. Sinclair," the driver said respectfully. Sinclair. The name echoed in Claire's mind like a warning bell. While James spoke quietly with the driver, Claire pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with sudden, desperate urgency. The search results loaded, and the screen's glow illuminated her face as it drained of color. James Sinclair wasn't just someone who built things. He was the billionaire CEO of Sinclair Global, a man whose company logo appeared on half the buildings in the city. He wasn't just rich, he was powerful, influential. The kind of man who closed billion-dollar deals before breakfast. The kind of man who existed in a completely different universe than a high school English teacher from Queens. He turned back toward her, his smile fading as he registered the look on her face. "You found out," he said simply, his voice calm but with a flicker of something that looked like disappointment. He took a step closer. "So what happens now? Are you going to run because I have money?" Claire stood frozen, her mind reeling. She felt like a minnow that had accidentally swum into shark-infested waters. Before she could stammer a reply, he extended his hand, palm open in invitation. "Don't let the night end like this," he said softly. "Come have coffee with me. No pressure, no expectations. Just coffee with someone who thinks you're remarkable." Against every logical instinct screaming at her to go home, Claire took his hand. They didn't go to a 5-star hotel or some exclusive club. Instead, James directed the driver to a 24-hour diner in Brooklyn, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone "hun." He ordered coffee and apple pie, and as they sat across from each other in that fluorescent-lit booth, something shifted between them. "Why did you really do it?" Claire asked, wrapping her hands around the warm coffee mug. "Why help a complete stranger?" James was quiet for a long moment, his expression growing serious. "My mother," he finally said, his voice rough with old pain. "When I was 12, my father left her, just walked out one day without explanation. I remember finding her sitting alone in a restaurant where they were supposed to meet for their anniversary. The look on her face." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. I swore I'd never let anyone feel that alone if I could help it. Claire's heart cracked open a little wider. This wasn't just a billionaire playing hero. This was a man carrying his own scars. I'm not looking to be rescued, she said quietly. I've spent 3 years trying to make myself smaller, quieter, more convenient for someone who couldn't even be bothered to break up with me in person. I'm done being anyone's consolation prize. Good, James said, his eyes fierce. Because you were never meant to be small, Claire. Even sitting there tonight, devastated and humiliated, you had more presence than anyone else in that restaurant. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. The words landed in her chest like truth, like permission to take up space again. They talked until sunrise, until the diner started filling with early morning construction workers and nurses ending their shifts. They talked about everything and nothing, about books and music, about dreams deferred and chances not taken, about what it meant to start over when you thought you had your whole life figured out. When James's driver finally dropped her at her apartment building as dawn broke over the city, Claire felt different, lighter, like she'd shed a skin that never fit quite right. "Can I see you again?" James asked before she stepped out of the car. Claire hesitated. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was crazy, that they lived in different worlds, that fairy tales didn't happen to high school English teachers from Brooklyn. But her heart, her bruised, battered, beautifully stubborn heart, had other ideas. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'd like that." His smile could have powered the entire city. The next 3 months felt like living in a dream Claire was afraid to wake up from. James courted her with a patience and attention that made Derek's lukewarm affection seem like neglect in comparison. But it wasn't the fancy restaurants or helicopter rides to the Hamptons that won her over. It was the small things. The way he showed up at her school with coffee during her planning period. How he actually read the student essays she graded at night and asked thoughtful questions about them. The Sunday mornings when he'd sneak into her apartment with bagels and the Times, content to simply exist beside her while she did lesson plans. He introduced her to his world slowly, carefully, always making sure she felt comfortable. Gallery openings where the art cost more than her annual salary. Charity galas where she rubbed elbows with celebrities and politicians. Through it all, James kept his hand on the small of her back, a constant reminder that she belonged there just as much as anyone else. But not everyone was thrilled about their relationship. The media had caught wind of James Sinclair's new girlfriend, the mystery woman, who was neither a model nor an heiress nor anyone from his usual social circle. The tabloids were vicious. "Billionaire's new charity case?" one headline sneered. "From classroom to boardroom. Gold digger or true love?" questioned another. Claire tried to ignore it, but the comments section of every article was a minefield. Strangers dissected her appearance, her background, her worthiness. They called her ordinary, desperate, a social climber. Each word was a small cut that bled more than she wanted to admit. The worst blow came from closer to home. Victoria Cross, James's former fiancée and current VP of Sinclair Global, was beautiful, brilliant, and utterly convinced that Claire was a temporary distraction. At a company dinner Claire attended, Victoria cornered her in the ladies' room with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You're sweet," Victoria said, reapplying her lipstick with practiced precision. "But you need to understand something. James and I have history. We built his empire together. We understand each other in ways you never will." She turned to face Claire fully, her expression pitying. "Enjoy it while it lasts, honey. But don't start picking out wedding china. Men like James don't marry women like you. They just explore. Then they come back to where they belong." The words burrowed under Claire's skin like poison. That night, she pulled away from James's embrace, Victoria's voice echoing in her head. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately sensing the shift. "Maybe she's right," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. Maybe I'm just fooling myself, thinking someone like you could actually want someone like me." James sat up, his expression fierce. "Look at me, Claire." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I don't care what Victoria said. I don't care what the tabloids print. I don't care what anyone thinks except you. You are not ordinary. You are not a phase. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I'll spend every day proving that if you let me. He kissed her then, slow and deep, a kiss that felt like a promise. But the doubt had been planted, and it grew in the dark corners of Claire's mind. Everything came to a head 3 weeks later. James had been acting strange, distracted, secretive, taking phone calls in other rooms. Claire's insecurity, fed by months of media scrutiny and Victoria's poison, bloomed into full-blown panic. When she arrived unannounced at his office one afternoon, what she walked into confirmed her worst fears. James and Victoria stood close together, his hand on her arm, her head tilted toward him in intimate conversation. On his desk sat an open jewelry box with a stunning diamond ring. Claire's world shattered for the second time in 6 months. She turned and ran, ignoring James calling her name. She made it to the elevator, tears streaming down her face, before he caught up with her. "Claire, wait! It's not what you think. Don't," she choked out, shoving his hand away. "I should have known. Victoria was right. I was just the detour before you went back to your real life." "That ring isn't for Victoria," James practically shouted, his voice raw with desperation. "It's for you, you stubborn, magnificent woman. I was asking Victoria's advice on the design because she knows you, because despite everything, she's been your friend." Claire froze, her breath catching. "What?" "I was planning a proposal," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I've been planning it for weeks. The ring, the location, every detail. I wanted it to be perfect because you deserve perfect. But now I'm standing in a corporate hallway, and I can't wait another second." He dropped to one knee right there, in front of the closing elevator doors, in front of his employees passing by, in front of the entire world. "Claire Bennett, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make me want to be better. I love that you call me out when I'm being an arrogant ass. I love that you cry during every romantic movie, even the bad ones. I love every single thing about you, and I don't want to spend another day without you in my life. Will you marry me?" Claire stood there, tears streaming down her face, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This wasn't the elegant proposal he'd planned. It was messy and public and absolutely perfect. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." When he slid the ring onto her finger, the entire office floor erupted in applause. Even Victoria, standing in the doorway of James's office, had tears in her eyes. But fairy tales don't end with just a proposal. Sometimes they get complicated before they can become real. Claire's father, a man she hadn't seen in 15 years, appeared out of nowhere when the engagement was announced. Suddenly, the man who'd abandoned her family when she was 10 wanted back in her life. He showed up at her apartment with apologies and excuses, claiming he'd changed, that he deserved a chance to walk her down the aisle. "Where were you when Mom was working 3 jobs to keep us fed?" Claire asked, her voice steady, despite the rage burning in her chest. "Where were you during my college graduation? My first day of teaching? Every single milestone you missed because you were too busy starting your new family?" Her father had the decency to look ashamed. "I was a coward. I know I was. But I'm here now. You're here now because I'm marrying a billionaire." Claire interrupted, her voice cold. "You're here because you see an opportunity. But you lost the right to be my father a long time ago. The man who walked me through life isn't connected to me by blood. He's the principal who became my mentor, who showed up to every event when you didn't, who actually cared about who I was becoming." She walked to the door and opened it. "You can call yourself my father if it makes you feel better, but we both know the truth. This is the last time we'll speak." As she watched him leave, Claire felt a weight she'd carried for 15 years finally lift. The wedding wasn't the grand society event everyone expected. Claire and James chose an intimate ceremony in a sun-dappled garden, attended only by the people who truly mattered. Claire's mother was there, her face glowing with a happiness her daughter had never seen before. Her student sent a video message that made her cry. And in a surprising gesture of genuine friendship, Victoria attended, having finally let go of her own hopes and genuinely wishing them well. At the reception, as the sun set and fairy lights began to twinkle in the trees, Claire stood for a moment just taking it all in. The laughter, the music, the love that filled the air. She remembered that night at Luminaire, the crushing humiliation, the feeling that her world was ending. A pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Sinclair?" James murmured into her hair. She'd kept her own name professionally, but she secretly loved the sound of his. Claire laughed and turned in his arms to face him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I was just thinking that the best moment of my life began on the night I thought everything was over. I was thinking that sometimes you have to be broken so you can be remade into something stronger. Sometimes you have to be left so you can finally be found by the person who was meant to find you all along." James smiled, a slow, beautiful smile, filled with all the promises of their future, and kissed her softly. "Best wrong turn I ever made," he whispered against her lips. "Walking into that restaurant that night. Best worst night of my life," she whispered back, getting stood up and humiliated. They danced under the stars, two souls who found each other in the wreckage and chose to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. Because that's the thing about rock bottom sometimes. It's the foundation you needed to build your forever on. And as Claire looked around at the life she'd built, not the one she'd settled for, but the one she'd fought for, and earned, and deserved, she realized that the girl sitting alone in that restaurant 6 months ago would be so proud of the woman she'd become. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. Sometimes the worst night of your life is actually the night everything finally falls into place. And sometimes, just sometimes, the stranger who saves you becomes the person who helps you save yourself. The music played on, the lights twinkled, and Claire Bennett Sinclair danced with her husband under the stars, finally, completely, wonderfully home.